and again, Scorching Bay view. And all these guys, they are slowly regenerating, still missing all these species of trees, which we're actually planting back. Just so we can basically provide the future habitat for and food for our native wildlife as it is now returning, as we don't have any introduced mammalian predators really anymore around there. And with the potential development that might actually happen up there, we don't really know what the long-term effects are going to be like for the bush in terms of, for example, our stream that you see here on this picture. I don't know how clearly you see it. It was actually taken quite a nighttime. But basically, Centennial Stream that we have in the middle of the peninsula is actually one of the healthiest streams in the Wellington City area. And this is because there's no runoff from any streets or any properties down into it. So it's actually quite cool, and it flows all year round. If you do venture further into the bush, you shouldn't really go off track, but if you do, there's even about a 3.5 meters of waterfall in there. You know, how many people do actually know this? You know, and this is usually where I hang around as well in my free time. Yeah, so that's a pretty cool place. So the question is, what's going to happen if we actually build on the area up around Mountain Moana as well? Because this stream, even if it flows through a city council reserve, its catchment, it's sort of the source of the spring is actually up just near the prison, up on that proposed development land as well. So the question is, what would actually happen with the stream? Would it dry up, or would it just naturally divert to somewhere else? Or would it be the runoff from streets and properties down into it? And how would that actually affect it? Because we have long fin eels, short fin eels, and banded kokopo in that stream. It's not large, it's not even wide as this table, but it has all these amazing wildlife. Also Coda, our native freshwater crayfish. And our plan for this year was actually to reintroduce freshwater mussels. They disappeared in the 60s from the stream, from what we've been told. But I did an eDNA sample of that water a few weeks ago. 2 samples actually. One came back with mussels. They might actually still be in there. Well, let's see how that goes. Hopefully. So yeah, we're a little bit worried what's actually going to happen with this stream, because it's kind of a bit of a lifeline for this bush as well. This is a pre-European bush. At the very bottom of it, you have species there that you have nowhere else on the peninsula anymore. And this is probably because you had a microclimate as well, which is quite damp and, you know, humid. And with that as well, if you actually then start working around these bush areas, is that going to open up the bush as well, create wind tunnels that further goes into the bush and dries it out? We don't really know, but some studies actually seem to point to that could actually happen. A few more of our wildlife there. These are taken at nighttime in the bush, so you have our banded kokopo there, small little school, native crayfish, not too many, but a couple, and then a little eel there as well, and one of the golden guys, which is pretty rare. And then we jump over to Scorching Bay Reserve, which is at the very top part of the reserve, also within the proposed development areas, is actually including our only remnant of large mature koi, which you actually have a flowering tree on the picture here. See, these guys are quite special. They actually flower straight from the trunk. A really good place to see this is basically around August, when they're flowering for the next year's fruit, and especially around the Botanic Garden, where you still have a really good sense of these guys. The tree trunks are completely white, covered in flowers, which are attracting a lot of bees, native bees, bellbirds, tubies, etc. But this also has a little stream catchment, and this is 1 out of 3 sites, breeding sites for our giant bush dragonfly. And these guys are pretty cool as well, right? And then you have actually the nymph larvae at the bottom picture as well. And these guys basically live in the mud in burrows up to 4 years before emerging as a dragonfly. So pretty cool. So these are kind of animals that we're afraid of losing if this all actually is going to happen. But then there's also the threat to the local bird life. So we have 2 pairs of Karerea, our native falcons, on the peninsula. And only in New Zealand nationally, there's about 2,500 pairs. So having 2 on the peninsula, that's quite amazing. These guys are more rare than kiwi. I mean, if you had places where kiwi was venturing around the place, would you actually do development on those sites? Not really, maybe. And we've actually had these guys nesting out here now for a couple of years. And one of those plate nesting sites is actually just up behind Shelly Bay. So what happened with all this logging that happened up there earlier this year and last year? We don't know really what the effects are going to be on these guys. You have the female on the left-hand side and the male on the right. In raptors, females are always larger, which is pretty cool. So you can easily tell the difference between these guys. But these threats can also include things like not just habitat degradation, but also window strikes. So you have a kid up there on your right-hand top side, and you have a mark on the window of the kid as well. And these guys are super prone to actually be killed by windows. Your kid are more likely to actually die of window strikes in Wellington now than actually getting eaten by predators. And so far, we've already lost 2 kid to window strikes this year around here. But we actually released 3 old rehab ones from window strikes just a few weeks ago. So if you go into our Facebook page, Te Motukarang Myanmar Ecological Restoration, you can see one of those videos where we're actually releasing them. But other guys that are actually prone as well, moorpork and kakariki, these are all animals that are actually coming back now, as well as the rat population is decreasing as well. So we're going to see more of those kind of human-wildlife conflicts where these guys are just flying into the windows. And here you have a kid that flew into a window, or actually not a window, a glass balustrade up on the eBay road. And that guy managed to actually get away from us by jumping over a ledge and get some wind under his wings and disappear, but we never actually saw that guy in that area around. So with window strikes, about 80% is internal injuries in kid litter, which means they actually slowly bleed to death somewhere else. So yeah. But if you do come across wildlife that has hit windows and things like that, the nest, Tekohanga at Wellington Zoo, is the place to go with all the natives, basically. And they will be well looked after until they can be released back, if that's the case. There's another window strike, long-tailed cuckoo that happened up in Strathmore 2 years ago as well. And we have this little cousin, the shiny cuckoo at the bottom right, and kingfishers caught there as well. And all these guys are increasing. But basically with development up, and hopefully they don't go over time here. One of our worries is also the light pollution that might actually happen as well. And you don't have to read all of this, I'm not going to talk about all of that stuff, but light pollution is quite a big thing that's happening with a lot of developments in places. You might have read that Kaikoura is now actually turning off lights around the city at nighttime because seabirds are coming, basically crashing down at night. So some of these seabirds are actually returning back here as well. So we have our little blue penguins, the Korora, on your left-hand side there as well. We have about 60 pairs on the peninsula as far as we know of, roughly. That number should be way higher. If you compare the peninsula on 1,000 hectares to Matthewsons Island in the middle of the harbor, Matthewsons Island has 600 pairs. We have 60. And these guys are actually super important for the bush because they're actually at nighttime when they're coming back to shore, they're bringing guano with them, basically bird fecals, and they're basically fertilizing the coastal forest as they're kind of venturing through the bush. And penguins can actually venture up to a kilometer inland each night to find a suitable nesting spot. We also have diving petrels up at your top right. You should really not hold these guys, but this guy was actually doing research on it, and this is our first diving petrel back to the Wellington area in almost 120 years. So these guys are just coming back. They're basically that size. And well, we hopefully have some cool plans for these guys to help the numbers increase as well. And a little sheer water at the bottom there. So these guys, super important for a forest, linking basically sea and forest together. But it's not just birds. We have lizards, geckos, skinks, all these guys hanging around here. Several species still missing, and the thing is with development as well, that might mean that more of these animals might actually get landlocked away and they can't actually venture over roads and things like that due to barriers. So they're just going to be isolated pockets, which is never good for a population, right? And not just these guys, there's also a lot of invertebrates. And these are local animals around here as well. So we have our Peripatus, our velvet worms, Naukioke, that's the top left guy, these guys have been around for almost 400 million years. So these guys are living fossils, and they're basically what you could say a missing link between worms and actually insects. And we just discovered it having these guys around here a few years ago, so that's really cool. Flatworms, weta, butterfly, all these guys will actually be affected in some way of development. So yeah. But we have amazing people here trying to restore the bush here. This is actually up by just beneath the prison on Monte Moana there. That's kind of close to the dual slalom bike track basically. So you actually see staff from Wellington Airport actually planting barrier here of more hardy colonizer species to basically stop that prevailing wind to actually blow it into the forest and drying it out. Same thing, top right there you have people planting the same kind of shelter belt along Niue Road just beneath the prison. And we've also had some celebrities down here helping to plant, so that's me and Jane Gould planting a koi at the bottom right there, and that's just beneath the prison as well, as a part of our story, that bush. And we planted up to 24,000 trees so far, which is really exciting, and all of these basically been missing species to the peninsula. And with some species, like largely milk tree, we only have one individual tree out here, and that's a male tree, so he's never going to breed with anyone. So we actually planted heaps of females, because the closest otherwise female tree is actually up in Kendala, so that would have been a bit of a distance for a tree to connect with. But otherwise, yeah, that's the kind of work we do here, and we're kind of hoping that we can continue doing as well in the future. And we would rather see the whole peninsula being forest again in a way, more or less.